Welcome, listeners, to a live edition of the SDSU podcast. This is episode 142. I'm your host, Andre Hagbertian, joined as always by Mr. Paul Garrison. What's going on, Paul?
What's going on, Andre? I mean, this is Christmas, right? I mean, we get to actually talk about an actual game and a game that's coming up. No more innuendo. We get to actually discuss what took place on the field. So I'm pretty geeked.
Definitely exciting to watch a game, write about a game, and talk about a game.
Yeah.
After what? I guess the last game was end of November against who did they play? Was it no? It was New Mexico, or it was Fresno State. It was the old camp. Old camp. That's right. So it was about almost 9 months to the day. So definitely exciting to talk about games. We've got 3 special guests coming up.
Yeah.
You guys know Mr. John Schaefer, the new play-by-play voice of Aztec football, obviously the host of the John and Jim, co-host of John and Jim show on 760 AM. We've got Malik White coming up a little bit later, who's a high school offensive lineman from Rancho Cucamonga. He's a class of 26 guy, so he's still only a junior in high school, but he was at Snapdragon as an official visitor. And he's being recruited by San Diego State. And then to close it out, we'll have Johnny Oliveira, our own East Village Times writer, who's been added to our team this year to help us out. So, yeah, we got good guests. And then in between that, we'll talk about, as much as we can talk about offense, defense, and special teams.
Love it. So if you got any questions, anybody out there got any questions, obviously drop it into the chat. Get those as we go along. But Andre, I mean, what would be your just kind of like first gut reaction of what took place last Saturday?
Well, my gut reaction at halftime was that not much has changed with Aztec football.
Okay.
And that was kind of the prevailing thought in the press box at halftime. But I think everybody figured that, okay, it was a first half, new coach, true freshman quarterback. This second half will tell us a lot about the team, or at least enough against an FCS opponent. And they did. The defense comes out. I don't think they gave up a first down on a penalty, but then they got a 3-and-out after that. And then they scored 4 touchdowns in a row offensively and 2 defensive touchdowns. Put the game away, almost even covered a 33 or 34-point spread. So I think it was a tale of two halves. They did what they were supposed to do. The opponents definitely was not, Texas A&M-Commerce was, 1-9 last year. FCS opponent, not too different than Idaho State that they played the last 2 years under the previous staff. But they definitely, with the second half performance, definitely dominated that. More so than they did last year against an Idaho State, which I think was a 1-win team as well from the prior year. So that was my prevailing reaction, is they did what they needed to do, and the second half was impressive, but that first half still left a lot of lingering question marks.
Sure, and I think that's well said. And I don't think anything was that surprising about what took place. I mean, for all the reasons that you said, and I think that, and we'll get into this as we go forward. I with all the penalties that they had, especially at the beginning of the game, I think it was very hard for them to develop any sort of momentum. They kind of killed themselves on offense with a whole bunch of penalties, and I think that prevented them from maybe establishing any kind of a rhythm. I thought it was interesting that there weren't any really short, obvious completions, other than a screen pass, they were trying to get, but just an in rhythm 3-step drop, throw right away to try to get some of those jitters or whatever that might be in there. I thought that they took a lot of deep shots early, and it's great if it worked. It was there. I mean, that was the right play call, but putting that as like your first, dozen throws as an FBS quarterback, I thought they kind of went to that well, maybe a little bit too much, and I thought that kind of led to it. And then in the second half, I thought it was just a different. I really thought the game honestly turned for Danny O'Neill and for the offense when he found Lewis Brown at the end of the first half on that really nice, short, quick post slantish kind of thing. And the coverage actually was really good. For being one-on-one, if he throws it, 2 inches towards the sideline, that ball's going to get batted, and he probably doesn't catch it. And so it was just perfect in the timing. And I thought that after that, it seemed like everything sort of steamrolled for the Aztecs, even though they didn't score at the end of the half. And as you said, I'm not really sure what this means in the scope of the season, of how good this team is. This is exactly what they were supposed to do. The flip side of it is how many games have the Aztecs played, in the past where they've been heavy favorites and, they just don't look head and shoulders better. They look lackluster. They look whatever those things are. So doing what they are supposed to do kind of kicks the can down to where it belongs, about saying, like, who is this team? How good are they really? And we can answer that question based off of what happens against Oregon State coming up.
Yeah, I mean, people forget they were 2-0 last year to start the season. They beat Ohio, and then they beat Idaho State, and then kind of the wheels fell off after that. So, getting off to good starts, well, the Arizona 2 years ago, but last year the team showed a lot of promise, at least in those first two games.
And Ohio turned out to be a pretty good team.
Yeah.
I mean,
They lost in the MAC championship game.
I think that's right. And yeah, no, I think that they were a pretty good team, went to a bowl and stuff like that. And so I think that, that team last year that was 4-8, I mean, there's so many games that could have went the other way, and they could have been a little bit more middling or being exactly where they were at. But it's just interesting how all of that stuff can happen. And then, we're at a point to see whether or not they're going to actually be able to build off of it. And that's the question that I really am curious about. If I am looking at, what happened against, I'm Oregon State and I'm looking what happened against Texas A&M-Commerce, I'm really just curious, like, how I would want to play it. I think if they go and they try to stop the run and they bring everybody close to the line of scrimmage to stop Marquez Cooper, that might give an opportunity for, some of those passing games. The flip side of it is, if they feel like they're physical enough to be able to stop it with fewer guys, or if after it's a clear run, somebody can get up there and get into that spot, it'll just be interesting to see, because I think that Danny O'Neill, obviously he has all those kinds of things and where he's going. Don DeMars, for those of you listening later when you don't get to see it, Don DeMars is checking in from Lisbon, Portugal. Slumming it, apparently. Andre, you're well traveled. You ever been to Lisbon?
I have not. No, I want to.
It's beautiful. It's one of the 3 places in Europe that I've been.
I can check off Dublin and Paris at the end of this month of places I've never been to, but Lisbon or Portugal, I have not.
Yeah, I haven't been to Europe in a long time, man. That's a expensive
You work
trip.
hard, you play hard.
Well, you do. I meant for me, because I have to take children with me, and so it just takes forever. No, it's great. So I'm looking forward to getting this thing fully kicked off and fully, just getting the season going. I've enjoyed our coverage so far and what we've been able to produce. So we got a big show ahead of us.
We do, as we wait for our first guest to join us. I think I see him in there somewhere. We're going to bring him on.
Let's do it.
My guys.
John.
John, what's up? Andre, why are you always so big?
What's up, Paul? What's that?
Andre, he keeps messing with the buttons, and he gets to be really big and we're really small. And I'm just curious,
I'm just trying to figure this whole streaming stuff out.
Well, yeah, I definitely have a face for radio, man. I tell you what.
Me too.
So John, just jumping in, man. I mean, first game, voice of the Aztecs, man. Aztecs football. I mean, what was that like?
First of all, I appreciate you guys having me. I really like what you're doing. I really do. I mean, it's an amazing resource for someone like myself, because this is what I do. This is the day job and the night job. So, I appreciate the work you guys are doing. And I think for Aztec fans, hopefully they have found you or will continue to find you in the days, weeks, and months ahead. But it was awesome. I mean, it was honestly a little bit surreal, truthfully, just calling calling a football game for San Diego State. It's something I hadn't previously done. I've done some basketball because, I'd filled in for Ted, like when he would have football conflicts with basketball. And I've worked with Rich Ornberger on some holiday bowls, and we did the Alliance of American Football back in 2019, but we had not called a San Diego State football game together. And to do it at Snapdragon Stadium, as you guys know, it's such a cool, unique venue and like setting, and it's a really good broadcast setup. Like it's well positioned and everything. So it was a blast. I mean, truthfully, I couldn't have asked for more. It was a really fun experience, and I'm excited to keep rolling on after game one.
It's great. I think everyone enjoyed, being able to, if they were there, being able to go back and hear some of the calls and things like that. I know I did. Uncle Teddy, Ted Leitner, he had a very gracious tweet that he sent out saying that everyone, Aztec fans, thank you for everything. You're going to love John. Thank you for the 29 years, man. So the question is, are you in it for the long haul, man? You ready for the 29 years to start?
Man, if I could somehow be so lucky. I am 100% in it for the long haul. As I don't want to even, as I sometimes say, my wife would slap me if I said this. I say, if I'm leaving San Diego, I'm leaving alone because she's not leaving San Diego. I mean, we're destined for San Diego. We moved here with a purpose to be in San Diego about 8 years ago, probably at this point, and I've covered San Diego State football and basketball for those 8 seasons, and it's been a true joy. The funny backstory, I think when I interviewed for a job at iHeart San Diego, it was like an informational interview, and the program director at the time asked me, like, what would be your dream job? And I said, well, moving to San Diego, I mean, it would be to be the voice of San Diego State. And that was like before I even was hired. Literally my first day ever in the city of San Diego, 8 years ago. And that somehow came to fruition 8 years later. So it's just funny how things work sometimes. Certainly fortunate and lucky. But yeah, no, this is a dream job for me. It's a complete dream job. If I could do it for the rest of my career, I would do it for the rest of my career. So it's a dream job.
So you did minor league play-by-play baseball right before you came to San Diego. You did some Aztec basketball. Now you're doing football. What makes a good play-by-play person?
Oh man, it's you know what? It's very subjective, obviously. I think there's a lot of styles that are successful, and they don't always have to be the same. They don't have to always run in unison with each other. I think a good play-by-play announcer is someone that is like able to convey themselves to their audience. You can't try to be someone that you aren't. I mean, Ted is unique to himself. I'm not Ted. Because I'm unable to be Ted. So all I can do is be myself, just like, Don Orsillo is different than Jesse Agler and so on and so forth, right across these local sports. And there's plenty of great play-by-play announcers. I mean, I don't even know how to describe play-by-play. It's one of these things that people get like enamored with and have so much passion in when they're young. Like I remember being a little kid and I loved it. I would stay up late and listen to it and watch it and consume it. And I just knew when I was like 8, this is what I wanted to do, or probably maybe before, truthfully, 8, 9, 10, certainly. So, and I just had a passion for it, and I graduated from college and I just spent 15 years in the minor leagues. I mean, 15 years on buses and, working in the office and doing sales. And my first 2 years I was interning, and I was in Lynchburg, Virginia for 5 years, where Liberty is. I didn't really do any work with Liberty, and Liberty at the time, I don't even know if I think they were FCS when I first got there. They might have even been Division II when I first got there. And then after 5 years in Lynchburg with the Pirates A-ball affiliate, I had an opportunity to go to a AAA team, the Phillies AAA team in Allentown, Pennsylvania. And I was there for almost 10 years. I left in July of my 10th season. So I probably called a couple thousand games. But to me, what makes a good play-by-play announcer is someone that has called a lot of games. It's kind of like the 10,000 hour theory a little bit. Like the more you do it, the better you get. There's some people that are really good right away. There's others that take more time. For me, it's one of those things that you can't learn it really. You don't take classes on it. You just got to do it. So that was my theory. That was minor league baseball is a great way to learn because there's so many opportunities. I mean, it's like 150 games in 160 days or whatever it is. So you're just learning on the job. And that's how I kind of came up, and that's where I got my skill set, and that's what I've kind of developed over the years. But it's something I knew I always wanted to do, and I've been fortunate enough to do it.
We all get to watch Aztec Fast in action, but you have to call it. Does the pace of the offense dictate how you call the play-by-play?
It's going to be impactful, right? I mean, we only have so far this one game, and it really has to do more with like the on-air relationship I have with Rich Ornberger, who's done it now for 8 seasons. And unfortunately, my first day at iHeart San Diego, I was actually working behind the scenes on Rich's show. He was working with Mark Willard at the time. But so I've known Rich for 8 years. We have an amazing relationship. We're good friends off air. We've worked together on air a lot. But it's just about kind of knowing when to get in and when to get out. I think that there's certainly enough time to paint the picture accurately for listeners, but you don't have much more time than that, so to speak. So it's tighter, you know. I mean, I don't know what the average time between plays was this past week. There were so many penalties, and it was game one, and you know you have the helmet communication and a freshman quarterback. So it's not like they were running it at the fastest pace in the country, would be my guess. And even Sean Lewis, as you guys know, talked this week. I found it really interesting. Like there's fewer possessions per team this year because you're getting more of an NFL helmet communication where it's taking more time to get those plays in, which I found to be pretty interesting. So there's enough time. It's definitely quickened at times. I thought when it was going, there were a handful of drives there where they were really going. And it's a pretty tight window to, you know, describe the play and then set up the next play. But we'll get the cadence down certainly as we get going.
Oh man, I don't know if I would want the job of trying to get Ornberger to be quiet. Wow. You know, but what did you see from the after? Huh?
Shots fired.
Yeah,
Shots fired.
He said it. He's actually, it's not really me. It was very, very more diplomatic than I put it. But he's like, it's really you try to figure out. Yeah. But what did you see from the Aztecs?
What did I see from the Aztecs in week one?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, I was really encouraged by what I saw. I mean, I knew this going in, and you guys know because I do the talk show. I predicted, it was the easiest prediction in the history of the world, that no matter what they did on Saturday, it wouldn't be quote unquote good enough. I knew that was going to happen because you got this, you know, FCS opponent, and you've got a brand new roster, so to speak. Not everyone, but a lot of new faces, a lot of new coaches, and a new head coach, and you're working in a true freshman quarterback, which is unique. I mean, it's not just unique to San Diego State. He's one of two true freshman quarterback in the country. So, I mean, that's unique and rare. And, you know, I don't know what people were expecting. And I think a lot of it is what, like, oh my gosh, they only scored 3 points in the first half. But I'm like, well, they scored 45 points in the game. And I thought they did a lot of things that were really positive and productive. And I even joked about it today on the radio. Just like, it's kind of like saying, well, like, you know, the Padres were, you know, tied with the White Sox through 4 innings, but they ended up winning 8-1. Like, nobody's like, well, who cares what the score is after the 4th inning? You know, I mean, it's a game of 60 minutes. It doesn't really matter what happens. If the halves would have flipped, the narrative would be completely different. If it was 42-8 at the half on their way to a 45-14 win, nobody would ever be the wiser to 30 minutes of quote unquote struggles offensively and some of the penalties. But that's not how it played out. Therefore, people make their own opinions. It's hard to please all people, is what I've learned doing this. But I think if you're going to be honest and fair with it, I don't know how you could ask for much more from like a Danny O'Neil and the offense and the defense. I mean, I think that maybe the star of the night was what they were able to accomplish defensively. It looked like a vintage San Diego State defense, opportunistic, forcing turnovers, scoring points out of it. So, of course, there's things to be worked on. Sean Lewis, I know, has already said that, and I think week 2 is going to be a lot harder than week 1. But it's hard not to be pleased, you know, with what we saw. Other than penalties, I think there's a lot of room for, you know, encouragement.
Absolutely, and then the penalties. I mean, it is the first game. I mean, they don't have a preseason. What excites you about Oregon State?
I just think it's going to be a really good game. I was just reading, because, you know, as we prepare for this game, that I kind of forgot about this. I mean, San Diego State went to Corvallis last year. We know home road matters a lot in college football, but they went to Corvallis last year. I think it's a 23.5-point underdog. Mm-hmm. And today they're somewhere around a 4-point underdog. I think it actually opened as a 3-point game, and it's probably anywhere between 3.5 and 4.5 points, which still means obviously Oregon State's a slight favorite. But I mean, you think about the difference, what a difference a year makes. I mean, Oregon State, with everything that's played out in realignment, with the changes that they've seen, they've got a first-year head coach. Yes, he was already there, and yes, he played there in Trent Bray. But I mean, they've lost a lot of pieces, and they've added a lot as well. And I think they were impressive, especially their run game in the first game. I'm just excited because I think it should be a really good game. So I think it'll be decided over 4 quarters. I'd be surprised if it wasn't. I think hopefully it'll be a 1-possession game at some point in that 4th quarter. And I think it's just a really good opportunity for San Diego State. You know, win or lose, it's a good opportunity. You get a program of Oregon State's caliber into Snapdragon Stadium. I think it's a great opportunity, really probably for both programs, and, you know, opportunities just for the Aztecs to continue to grow and see where they are as a team. Because, you know, it's like, I don't really know what people's expectations are, but I think for me personally, it's like I just want to watch them continue to grow. I think you have to be fair and reasonable, and you got to give Sean Lewis and his team and his staff chances to grow. And there's going to be highs and lows, and there's going to be things they have to overcome. And I just want to see how that plays out in the weeks ahead. And then hopefully, as they get going, they'll find a level of rhythm that puts them in a position to be a better team as the season continues.
How now that you're the official play-by-play guy, how is your week different? Like, you have your radio show, you do the Padres wrap-up show. Where does prep for the play-by-play of the game fall into that?
I asked my wife. It's pretty busy. Yeah, I mean, it is really busy. Because I'm on campus at least a couple of times a week. And then, like you said, I'm doing my radio show, which involves preparation as well. I'm doing stuff at night around Padres games, and in between all of that, I'm watching games and watching film and prepping and doing boards. And I mean, it's what I love to do. It does take up a lot of time. I'm also the father to a 5-year-old. We have a child, so it's going to be a busy fall. There's no question about it. I spent a lot of time in the summer, kind of doing the best I could to put myself in a position where I would be able to make this manageable. So I love it. It is a lot of work. It is a huge time commitment. I've always thought in play-by-play, it's like the more you prepare, the better off you are on the game. It's kind of like playing sports. It's like the more you put in, the more you get out. It doesn't always work like that, but by and large, it does work like that. So football is the heaviest lift of all sports, in my opinion, having called baseball. Baseball is such a day in and day out. It's almost like a soap opera. You just pick up where you left off. There's work that goes into it, no question, but you just have such a familiarity. Basketball, because of the time constraint and 5-on-5, involves preparation, but it's just a different game. Football is like the ultimate test, I think, for radio specifically and play-by-play. So it involves a lot of work to put yourself in a position where the audience can trust what you're saying and conveying, and you can feel good about it. So it's a lot of work, but it's work I enjoy.
Oh, man, John, appreciate you being able to jump on. You talk about how busy you are, and then you can find time for your guys. Appreciate you.
I'm happy to do it, guys. Again, continued success with what you're doing. Looking forward to seeing you over at Snapdragon, hopefully this weekend, and I'll do it anytime. So thanks for having me on.
Awesome.
Thank you so much.
Well, that was great.
John Schaefer. He's saw a question here. Are you going to continue with your Aztecs wrap-up show? I'm sure he is, but it's probably not going to be game day because he probably has some post-game responsibilities or things like that. So good question, Fernando. I know we talked about Danny O'Neill, but do you want to start with him?
Okay.
And how you think that he did on Saturday?
Well, I mean, I thought it was really interesting. Like, I think that he played in the first half very similar to how he played in the second scrimmage without the turnovers, right? And potentially, this is again, we haven't asked him this question. I don't think he would give us the answer anyway. But potentially the reason why, and I was saying before that I thought it was interesting that they weren't passing the ball short and trying to let him build some of that, potentially is because they knew that he would be amped up. They knew he would need to get his legs underneath him. And so by throwing it deep, everything's safe. So that could be a reason why they did that. But whatever the case, I thought that he looked like he looked in the scrimmages. And I think like you, my phone is blowing up. The people that I'm around at the game, they're asking questions like, are they going to bring in another quarterback? Is Javance coming in? And, all those kinds of things. And what I told them was, if Danny O'Neill plays, they were fine with what he did in the first half. Like I thought they were okay with it. And I was like, they'll run with him for the rest of the game because they want to allow this kid to be able to seasoning, and they want to allow this kid to get better. And he did. I mean, you finished 11 of 12, and honestly, out of the 11 of 12, obviously the touchdown to Lewis Brown is going to be the one that everybody remembers. But the one that he threw out of bounds, where he looked one receiver to his left, looked at another one, saw they weren't there, kind of did a jump pass, and he sailed it over out of them. I mean, that was as good in that situation as a completion. And so it was a really smart play. I think that was what I asked Sean Lewis after in the post game. You've been telling us that he in practice is looking one way, and it's not how he's been looking at the scrimmages. Did you see it? And he goes, yeah, that's what I've been seeing in practice. And so I think, as I wrote when they announced the decision, one of the beauties of just the way the schedule set up is this game. I think just by running the football, they were going to win this game. Physically, they wore down the Lions, and I think that was going to happen no matter what. And I thought it was just a great little scheduling thing that they were able to get this team for Danny O'Neill's first game. And I can't imagine, like, realistically what else you could want from the kid.
Yeah, I think the execution might have been poor in the first half, but the decision making was good.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that is a sign. That was a sign at halftime where you could say, execute better, continue to make those good decisions, and it'll pan out. Maybe not pan out 11 of 12 for 2 touchdowns, good, but it did. I think the reason why they were taking those deep shots is because that's just how the defense was playing them. They were blitzing, they were bringing a lot of guys, they were leaving Lewis Brown out there one-on-one, and Brown was beating the guys. It was just a matter of whether the ball was there. And then on one play, when the ball was there on a slant, on a third down, he dropped it, which that could have been a touchdown too, or at least a first down. So there were good enough things where you could say, okay, execute better and it'll come. Obviously, the thing that could help a true freshman quarterback, any quarterback, is a good running back. And we saw it from Marquez Cooper. I mean, we talked about him a lot last week on the show. And, I mean, he showed it. And he showed why he had 3 1,000-yard seasons. He showed why he was the active rushing leader coming into the season. I think he probably still is after that performance. But everything that we thought that we would see from him, we saw. The vision, the cutbacks, even being physical on that, I think 7-yard touchdown run. I think he got hit at like inside the 5-yard line. He kind of bounced off a couple people and then bounced off the last guy into the end zone. So he's not just a short, speed guy. He's got bulk to him too. If you've stood next to him, you would see that. Because at practice or at the photo shoot, the Blenders photo shoot, I think it was the first time I actually met him in person. And he was in uniform, but he was short, but he was bulky. You could tell, okay, this guy has beef to him. And it's a lot, almost 30 carries. It's a big workload against an FCS team. Can it keep up? Sean Lewis said he can. He's durable. But yeah, we'll see as the season progresses, because with Keenan Christian out, they didn't give Jalen Armstead or Lucky Sutton much run. I don't think Cam Davis got a carry. So they're leaning on him, and he's going to deliver. It's just a matter of holding up.
Yeah, and before getting on to Cooper, I think it was really interesting what you talked about with Lewis Brown. We're making all of this idea of like, okay, it's Danny O'Neill's first game. He needed time to warm up, but so did Lewis Brown, right? Lewis Brown, on one of those that it was on the deep pass, like he had an inside release when you should have an outside release, because that just helps the quarterback. And O'Neill kind of threw it more towards that side, and that was part of that. At the press conference on Monday, Coach Lewis was talking about a mistake that he had made. There was, again, that drop. But as the game went on, he kind of found himself. If you go back on and watch the replay, the play before he gets the long touchdown, he has a block where he takes the same cornerback and like takes him out of bounds. And I was actually as impressed with that as anything else, because I think when a receiver like carries on that persona, that physicality, I think that goes into what happens when they're trying to catch the ball. And so I think if anything, maybe just getting into that game shape and that game physicality that's needed. And so it's I think a lot of people on the Aztecs, and probably a lot of people on Texas A&M Commerce as well, it's just hard to hit the ground running and to be at your best. I mean, that's the reason the NFL does the preseason. Cooper was fun, man. I think is probably the best way to say it. San Diego State fans who watched, so many great backs in the past, I think have an appreciation for someone who's able to do what he did. But man, I didn't understand why no one could tell me, like, to describe his style when we had asked before. And it's just, he's unique. Like, I have never seen a running back jump over people like I saw him jump over. That happens occasionally,
I
but I
think
mean,
it's twice. He tried to hurdle twice.
yeah, or even more. And it was just an interesting thing. He has good vision, he has the strength. And it'll be really interesting to see, as you say, like, how his carries progress. But also keep in mind, 2 years ago, 3 years ago, when he was at Kent State, he had 280 carries for Sean Lewis in his office, and the next year he had 240. So he's proven to be that kind of bell cow, durable guy. Obviously, the carries that he got on how many total carries he was there?
26, 27.
Yeah, so I mean that's in that area. So it'll be really interesting to see how else they go. But tell me about what you saw from the offensive line, what you saw from especially after Joe Borjan went down.
Well, the penalties were, I think, for the team, frustrating. I think Ross Ulugalu had two on the first 3 plays of the game. I think Joe Borjan had a false start. That was frustrating, and they didn't really get the running game going really until the second half. I don't know what it was. I don't know if it was just a direct correlation to Borjan going out and then Christian Jones sliding over to left tackle and Miles coming in at left guard. I think after halftime, if it was still the same starting offensive lineman, they would have done the same. I think they just really just picked it up as a team. But I thought that they obviously dominated the line of scrimmage in the second half, dictated the tempo. I think Danny O'Neal got sacked twice in the first half, and I don't think he got touched in the second half. You could tell probably the Lions defense was tired too from just the pace and physicality of playing against an FBS team. But I'm curious to see. I mean, Sean Lewis was a little nondescript when he was asked about Borjan's health at the press conference yesterday,
Right.
saying they're still doing tests. By now they've done the tests and they know the results. So they know. It's just a matter of, is it a short-term thing? Because he said it was knee and ankle. He got rolled up pretty good. So is it a strain? Is it a 4 to 6 week thing? Is it a season-ending thing? We don't know. I'm sure we'll find out soon. But Mike Schmidt, he has a plan, whether that's Christian Jones and Miles permanently or whether it's something a little different. Because sometimes what you'll do is you have a game plan, a backup plan for a game, but then when you have a whole week to prepare, knowing that this guy is out, you might go a little different, and you'll have a week to prepare for that. So we'll see what he does there. What do you think?
Well, I would say that the thing that I would be most concerned about with Joe being out is I think that they had depth going into that you felt comfortable. I think that, if, let's say, Braden Bryant would have went down, I think you could slide Ross over, you could put in Morale, and you would still have a really solid five. And I think you could do that anywhere on the interior. And then if Nate Williams went down, you could move Christian Jones to whichever side made the most sense, and so I think that their depth was really good because I think Morale can play, and I think he showed that. I mean, you want to talk about coming into the game and making an impact. I mean, that long touchdown by Cooper, that's the left side. I mean, that's between Jones and Morale. So I think that the depth that you feel really good about and would have felt really good about going into the game, I think you feel less good about going forward. You still have a guy like Dean Abdullah, who's played a lot of football. And you know, I don't think that he would embarrass anybody or anything like that. But I just don't think, like, to this point, he hasn't proven to be anything but serviceable. And I think the other guys have the potential to be, you know, a little bit more than that. So I think that's the biggest thing that I saw. I was impressed by Christian Jones. I think that he does look different. He looks like he grew up. I mean, I don't know how else to say it, but you know, just offensive linemen that takes a little time to be able to kind of figure out how to be who they are. And you know, we're in a couple of minutes going to be talking to Malik White, another offensive tackle. You know, and they're so much bigger than everybody when they play high school football by and large. That's something. But in the few minutes before Malik gets here, I really thought that the wide receiver core. I think the wide receiver core really missed a third option. I think Nate Bennett, you know, as a veteran guy, again, people are all working their different levels of rust off and things like that. But I just didn't feel like, you know, he was like a real viable threat. I thought Jay-Sean Polk was. I thought obviously Lewis Brown was. And so I don't know. I know Mekhi Shaw played. He did return a kick, got interfered with. He did go in one time. So wherever his leg is and being able to be a receiver, I think that could be a real boon. And then Jerry McClure, he obviously was an or with Bennett, but he was in street clothes. And so, you know, not sure exactly what's going on there. But I think that, you know, if they could get, I think if you watch the game that they played, you are going to shade to Danny O'Neill's going to throw to the right. You're going to shade that he's going to throw kind of that a little bit like in the middle, a little bit to the left where Pope was. And you're going to leave that outside guy until he can prove that he can be dangerous. And if they can add, you know, kind of that taking the top off guy on both sides to take advantage of the guys in the box and the numbers things, it has the potential to be potent. But I'm really curious to see how Oregon State attacks San Diego State. If they're gonna commit, I mean, the touchdown to Brown. If you look at the pre-snap, everybody is within 10 yards of the line of scrimmage. I mean, they had, you know, the one safety 6 yards away, the other safety is 9 yards, and they just got all sucked up inside, and Lewis was able to go over the top on them. And so it'll just be curious if Oregon State plays the same way. But that's what the spread offense is supposed to make you do, right? It's supposed to make you say, like, what numbers are you going to be able to dedicate to this? Against Idaho State, Oregon State played a lot of too high safety, but again, Idaho State passes the ball more. So how they attack the Aztecs, I think, is the story. Can the Aztecs establish the run game? You know, I think it's a big thing.
Yeah, Fernando has a good comment. And even though they didn't connect on too many deep passes, refreshing to see the offense taking those shots. It was not to say that they did not throw deep passes in previous years. It just looked a little different. Mm-hmm. Maybe the deep passes in previous years were more, you know, out of the under center, play action, things like that. These ones were more drop back, one-on-one coverage. So, but it was, as they connect on more, obviously those are the explosive plays are going to come from.
Yeah, and I mean, I think the other one I was too is like one of Danny O'Neill's overthrows was like 60 yards in the air. Yeah. And you're just like, oh, okay, that kid's got that in him. You know what I mean? And that spreading of the field, you know, and that ability. He threw a really good ball that was like to his left that, you know, didn't quite get hit, didn't really find the receiver very well. The receiver didn't really make a play on it. But it was a good ball because it was to his left. It was over a couple of, you know, the hash marks and then the numbers and you know, those places that the best quarterbacks are able to get the ball to that really put stress on the defense.
I see our next guest in the studio.
Oh, let's go.
So we have Malik White, who is a junior at Rancho Cucamonga High School, offensive lineman, 6'4", 315 with a 7'1" wingspan. ESPN has him as a 4-star rated. Malik, all right, can you hear us?
Hello.
Hi,
Hey,
Malik.
Malik, how's it going? How's your
You doing
evening
all right?
going?
It's going good.
Good, man. I appreciate you taking the time. I know it's kind of late.
Yeah, thank you for having me. It's okay.
Absolutely, man. So you were you were at Snapdragon on Saturday. Tell us a little
Yeah.
about your.
I like the experience. I like the new stadium. It's a little bit smaller than Qualcomm, but it was nice seeing it packed and all the fans and stuff.
Okay, now that's now. I don't know if anybody else picked that up,
Yeah.
but Malik just said Qualcomm, right? So this guy's been going to Aztec games for a long time because you had a cousin who went to the school. So tell us about that.
Well, his name was Kevin Montgomery. He played mainly special teams, but he was a DB. Like the main memories I have of just going to the stadium, just having fun and tailgating, because I was so little. I used to just go and tailgate before the games. Then the other big thing I remember was watching the players walk out for the Warrior Walk.
Mm. Now, Kalen Montgomery is the rapper, right?
Yeah,
Kalen FR. I don't know how you pronounce it, right?
yeah,
Is that how you pronounce it?
yeah.
Yeah. For any listeners, I think he was a wide receiver on the Aztecs.
Yeah.
He's a corner.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Tall, lengthy. When he was just I know it's gonna catch you by surprise, Malik, but I don't listen to a lot of rap.
Okay.
So when I was making all of those connections, I actually remembered him as a DB more than I knew him as a rapper.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I was like, because he had all the physical tools. But how are you related to him when you're 315 and he wasn't close to that?
I don't even.
Robbie Casillas says born to be an Aztec. There you go. So you've been going to San Diego State games for a long time. Would you consider yourself a fan of the Aztecs?
Yeah, I would say I've been going ever since I was like probably 7 or 8.
How far is Rancho Cucamonga to San Diego? It's like an hour and a half drive.
It's a little bit longer. It's probably 2.5 to 3 with traffic.
Oh,
Yeah.
that Southern California traffic.
Yeah.
So you're an offensive lineman. You're a junior in high school.
Mhm.
What position do you play, and how do you describe your style?
Oh, you said do I predict?
What position do you play, and how do you
Okay.
describe your style?
I really played everything on the O-line. The only thing that I didn't play in the game of last year was center. But I played all 4 positions except that. And for like my position that like I'll probably say I'll probably say guard. But I can play all 5.
Which one do you like best?
I don't really have a preference. I just like the left side more, I'd say.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Protect the blind side.
Yeah.
It is. There it is. What schools are you hearing from that are maybe recruiting you the hardest?
Obviously, you guys, San Diego State, UNLV, Utah, and Syracuse are the ones that are recruiting me the hardest.
Okay, so I think you just hit like every time zone in America, no?
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that officially makes you a national recruit. That's great, man. And I mean, tell me about those schools, man. What do you like about those schools?
The main thing for me, I just like the coaches, or it's like their style of coaching, or how they've connected with me, recruiting me, and stuff like that.
Have you been to other schools? I know this wasn't an official visit. It was, you were visiting because of this thing. But have you been to any other stadiums or anything like that?
The only one I've really been to is Allegiant, where UNLV plays, but I haven't been to anywhere else this season yet.
And as you're thinking about your process, like would you say that you're just in the beginning stages of it? Because obviously you're a 26.
Yeah.
But where do you feel like your plan, if everything worked out perfectly, when you'd be nearing a decision?
Yeah, I'd say I'm like in the middle, I'd say kind of. I'll plan to make a decision where I want to go. It's probably a little bit after my junior year, so like a couple months after the season.
Now, I believe you're coming back to Snapdragon for the Oregon State game on
Right.
Saturday. What are you looking for to on this weekend's trip that maybe you didn't do last weekend?
Like, what do
Is
you
there a
mean?
difference?
What'd you say?
Is there a difference to the specific visit?
Not really, I would say. I'm just excited to see how they go against Oregon State.
So when you
How
go and you watch a game, like what is it that you, as a recruit, like what is it that you're paying attention to?
I'm paying attention to the O-line, obviously, or how the offense is doing in general. Because I noticed they started a little bit slow, but they definitely picked it up second half.
what Coach Mike Schmidt is obviously the
Yeah.
offensive line coach here. How long have you had a relationship with him, and what makes him such a good recruiter?
I've probably been talking to him for about a year. He hasn't been able to come down to the school yet, but he said he's trying to do that this year. Um, but as far as like who I've been talking to the most, it's probably been Sean Dillon and
Hmm.
Demetrius Sumner.
And what is Coach Sumler like in the recruiting world? We've heard great things about it, but what's your perspective?
I'd say he's very he's very persistent. He doesn't like he keeps me updated, just keeps me posted on things that are happening with the team, stuff like that.
And when you're thinking about, I mean, take this through because we obviously, this is also will surprise you. I didn't have the athletic ability to
Okay.
be recruited for anything. My wife barely recruited me for marriage. You know what I mean? It was like one of those. But listen, I'm just when you get late at night, man, you just get honest. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
these are facts. But what is it like for a recruit? Because obviously the staff is locked in on the game.
Yeah.
But they're also interacting. We see all that kind of stuff. And so, I mean, what is that like as a recruit, being able to show up on game day and still have the hospitality? I mean, what is that like?
Yeah, it's pretty special, I'd say, because the coaches, they have to do a lot of things, but they still make the time to talk to you and meet with you, just see how you're doing. Then they have to go out there and coach their position. So
Now, one guy that you obviously know that we don't is Ashton.
yeah,
Um,
okay.
yeah, so I saw Ashton Wintrick, right?
I think that's how you
I'm
say
pretty
it.
sure. Yeah, Ashton.
Yeah.
I interviewed the kid and done articles. I should know this, Andre.
Okay.
So Ashton, tell us about your relationship with him, and he's already committed to SDSU. So
Yeah.
what kind of person and player are the Aztecs getting for the class of 2025?
They're getting someone good. I'm pretty good friends with them. We've been training partners basically for the past 2 years, I'd say. Or we used to train for the same online coach.
Oh,
Just off-season work.
Who's
so
the line coach?
It was or he's called KO Bros, but we haven't been training with them anymore.
and what kind of offensive lineman is Ashton?
He's pretty aggressive. He's huge, obviously. Strong punch, yeah.
When somebody is 6'4" and 315 with who's 7'1" wingspan,
Yeah.
and he calls someone else massive, just kind of gives you the idea of Ashton's size and coming in. But Ashton was there also
Yeah, he
for the
was.
opening. Pretty cool, man. Well, Malik,
Yeah.
I really appreciate you taking some time, man. Best of luck in your decision.
Okay.
I think you gave great insight into just another part of the Aztec season that we couldn't provide.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
All right.
That was Malik White, class of 26 offensive lineman. Really looks like a great kid, soft spoken, but I'm sure he's mean when he gets those helmet on and goes to block those defensive linemen for sure.
And it's funny kind of how that happens, how they're able to kind of like flip a switch. I think
Yeah.
over the years, some of the kind of like the guys that are the easiest to talk to have always been the big offensive linemen, and they get on the field and they're just these nasty, like it just kind of changes and it flips. But I thought, we invited him on here because, I think that lost in the newness of Sean Lewis and the newness of Snapdragon Stadium, the newness of the offense, is the way in which they go after recruits has also changed. He mentioned that the person he's talking to is Sean Dillon, the director of player personnel. And the things that I saw is the big group, they brought them down next to the tunnel and the pyrotechnics are going off and all these kids have their phones out like they're at a rock concert, smile from ear to ear watching the Aztecs come out like it's a WWE show or something like that, and I think that they're doing a great job. I mean, you get a guy who is this well thought of with the offers that he has, and you get him to come down to SDSU for your first 2 games. That's a feather in the cap, because obviously as he's making his decision, he's not going to have to guess, what San Diego State is all about.
Yeah, before we hop into the defense, I do want to discuss this briefly. Lamar had a question. Any concerns that Sean Lewis knocks the ball out of the park and bolts for a Big Ten job? Rumors he flirted with a bit with Northwestern, Purdue, and Illinois. I think the day that he was hired, I saw some fans talk about this, that like this is going to be a stepping stone. We even asked J.D. Wicker. I think you asked actually in the post-introductory press conference about like a buyout clause.
Yeah,
right? A buyout clause.
Hadn't even been announced for 45 minutes.
And so it's a concern. Anytime you're not in a Power 5, there's a concern, especially on the offensive side, because we know how offensive coaches are so heavily sought after when they have a little bit of success, right? So it's a concern. I think if Sean Lewis gets to a point where he's poached by a Power 5 team to be a head coach in a year or two, that's a really good sign for the success of the team, right? In that year or two. What that means for the future and who takes over, that's obviously we can debate that and we can talk about that. But I think it's important to realize, like, if he is poached, like in the next 2 years, that means the offense did really well and the team did really well. So I do think in that sense, it shouldn't be a concern because I think there's a correlation between team success and Sean Lewis, teams coming after Sean Lewis to be a head coach.
Yeah, and it's again, there's the world that we live in is a copycat world, right? That's how it is. So I think what's happening at Florida State should ease your concerns just a little bit, because before Sean Lewis was Sean Lewis, there was Coach Norvell at Memphis, and he was the like hot candidate who had this great offense and all that kind of stuff. And he's, he hasn't done it quite yet at Florida State, and obviously the start that they had. It is
Florida State was in the national championship hunt until their quarterback got injured last year. I mean, that's pretty good.
That is pretty good. I know, but they all still feel like but you're right. But I think that's been an abjuration from where he's at. But then starting this year at number 10, and now they're out of the rankings after two things. I just think that if a guy like that can establish that consistent winner, I think people might want to, go a different route. Like Arizona went a different route, and they got a more established guy who had a longer track record. But quite honestly, I think that's the reason why they hired Rocky Long, is because they didn't want to get on the coaching carousel after Brady Hoke left after only 2 years. So this has happened before. And so, yeah, I think it's a concern. I will say there is nothing that transpired on Saturday that would make you think that he's like out the door. I mean, you know what I mean? But it was good. It was what was expected. But yeah, absolutely. I think that's always going to be a conversation for every player that comes in. I mean, you don't think that being, as John talked about, one of the 2 freshman quarterbacks, you don't think that if people could get into his parents' ears from bigger schools and NIL collectives that they're going to not be, that's not part of that world. You're naive if you don't think that there aren't people paying attention to what Danny O'Neil's doing right now and saying, can we poach him? And you can go across the board. And that's the way it is, you know, if you're a good FCS team as well. And it might be San Diego State that's doing the poaching. I mean, there's in all the legal ways, you know, but I'm just saying like that's the world that everybody lives in. And that's why I think when it comes to, you know, fan support, the great things and all the Andre's article that came out today and the successes that NIL has had at San Diego State, you know, I think that those kinds of things that as they're starting to build momentum for that, $100,000 with the 100-yard challenge, $50,000 with the golf, getting the Blender sunglasses and that release and whatever that is going to mean monetarily. So I think
it's supposed to be 100K according
yeah,
to.
So those are significant things that you can build off of. That you're seeing the momentum that I think you saw with basketball. You're seeing that starting to translate over into the football. So that's why all those things need to be there to make San Diego State as viable as possible. But the day and age of having, you know, ways to make people stay that maybe they wouldn't have wanted to, you know, are kind of gone in college football.
Yeah, I mean, if we move to the defense, I think my biggest takeaway was Eric Schmidt's willingness to play different schemes, personnel, packages based on personnel.
Yeah.
I mean, starting the game in a 3-4, playing dime, like playing the dime defense. When's the last time Aztecs played a dime defense? And then moving an outside corner in the slot in the dime defense.
Yep.
You know, I remember asking Brady Hoke when they were having struggle defending the slot last year, like, hey, is there any thought to moving some of your outside corners inside? He said no. They don't fit that. You know, Chris Johnson was one of those guys, and they said no, he can't move to the slot. Well, guess what? Eric Schmidt thinks he can. So I think that was my biggest takeaway was that this is not there might be some similarity sometimes, but this is not the same defensive staff. And this staff is more willing to match personnel and vary it up to give defenses different looks because it wasn't something that the prior staff under 335 felt like they needed to do. They were like, this is what we do. This is what we do well. And we are going to dictate to offenses instead of the offenses dictating to us. And so I thought that was that was my biggest takeaway from the defensive side is how much they were willing to mix it up across the board.
I couldn't agree more, and I think one of the fun parts, you know, again, if you like football, I think which we all do, right? If you're on here with us about 10 o'clock, you like football, right? We're all football geeks. But if you could go and you could be like, what would a Brady Hoke, Rocky Long led team, how would they play against a Sean Lewis led team? And how fun that would be. That's almost what Saturday is. And you know, the styles I think make for a great game. And the style contrast between these two teams, I think is really key. You know, I asked Sean Lewis that kind of ironic, you know, when talking about the 4-2-5, and they were pretty close to a 3-3-5, you know, on that opening kind of play. And you could even argue they were in a 4-3, you know what I mean? Like with Brady Nasser being that edge rusher. And it's I'm just curious, like, will they be forced to match up to Oregon State? Will they be forced to match up because of their size, because of the two tight ends, because of the size? See, Robbie's a football geek. And I think that's like the fun of it. I think the other thing that really stood out to me is I thought that their secondary can play. I thought they were physical. I thought they were fast. I thought that when Texas A&M-Commerce went from the two tight ends, we're going to be big, and then they started spreading things out, I thought that played into the Aztecs' strength, that they went and they, instead of making, the key on the inside. It was about on the outside. And so I thought there was good things all around. I thought Eric Butler played really well, even though he played with one hand. He obviously led the team in tackles, but he was just fast. Had one really good hit that jarred a ball loose for an incomplete. He had another one that he was so close to getting, but I thought he played really well. I thought Deshaun McEwen. I thought that he had some issues. They like took him out of the game a couple of times, and for Josh Hunter, and it's a guess, but it looked like it was some alignment stuff because they went straight to the the iPad or whatever's out there, which I don't think it's Apple, so whatever the equivalent is of Surface or whatever they are,
Probably
but
Surface tablets,
yeah, whatever they are, and so I think it was going over to that part of it, but man, he came downhill on the edge one time and just like stopped a guy in the backfield, and then you go, that's the kind of play that they need out of their stud. So there's a lot, man, to like about the defense. Interestingly enough, I think with all of it, I'm not really sure how strongly the linebackers played. Not the edge rushers. I thought the edge rushers were good. But the two linebackers, what did you see from them?
I thought they were okay. Owen Chambliss wasn't. You didn't see him a lot. Like, I don't know how many tackles he had, but he wasn't around the ball that often. Latuli, I thought, was better. Obviously, he scored a touchdown, but that was more being at the right place at the right time.
Right.
I don't think they were quite tested necessarily. So it's hard to say. I thought the defensive line played well, like in terms of getting pressure on the quarterback, like the JD Coffey pick six. I mean, I think he had two guys hitting him as he was throwing the ball.
Chambliss, by the way, was one of them.
Yeah, and Ryan Henderson, right?
I think that's right.
Yeah, so I wouldn't say they necessarily had poor games. I think if you look back on it, like I think the highest graded players were probably like in the secondary. And then maybe I think Trey White was probably graded high too in PFF. So
who was graded high?
Trey White.
And who else?
The secondary.
Oh, the secondary was okay. They looked it. I mean, yeah.
Yeah, Chris Johnson, Eric Butler, DeLaShawn Staley. He's another guy. That played really well.
And the thing about coming from an FCS, you don't always get like full games. You know what I mean? And you don't get to really see guys. Like it's harder to get film on them. And so I tried to look for him, and I didn't see a ton other than like interviews, little highlights, things like that. That dude was fast. He was physical. Yeah. He obviously got a pick that got wiped off the board. But going into it, I think I wrote that one of the things I was excited about in watching the game is this is one of the most athletic secondaries. Like humans that size are kind of just that athletic. You know what I mean? There's obviously, Antonio Cromartie kind of guys, but there's the rest of the world-class athletes. And I thought that played out. They were fast, they were physical. They moved around. I thought Trey White was excellent, which obviously is why I highlighted him in the article. I thought all of his stats for the game were all like not what he did well, if that makes any sense. Like he got his half sack off of a bad snap that the quarterback ran and kind of got up, and he was able to get in there. He obviously had that great burst, but I mean, if the ball doesn't bounce to his side, he doesn't get a chance to blow past you know what I mean? They gave him a forced fumble, but I mean, that's a, although I will say PJ does have some great pictures when we're photographers of him knocking it out of his hands. But I think Robbie's here for those of you not seeing this. He says, we're going to find out a lot about our linebackers this week. I agree. They're going to have to not just the biggest thing I think with the linebackers is I think that they can't allow these guys to fall forward too much. They're going to have to, you're going to need all of Chambliss's 232 pounds to hit guys and to get them down so they can have the 3rd and 5 and 3rd and 4 and 3rd and 6 and maybe force them to have to be uncomfortable. The number of rushes for first downs, I think it was something like 24 for Oregon State last week, which is just crazy. Like if San Diego State allows 24 first downs via the rush, they're going to lose. I thought Fernando had a good point from what he saw.
Depth on defense looks good. They didn't lose a step no matter who they were playing. There's 2 questions here that are related to what you just mentioned. Uke Journey asks, how many rushing yards do you think we need to keep Oregon State under to win the game? And then our very own Don DeMars, the Beavers rushed for 6 yards per attempt last year. That was Damian Martinez, who's no longer there. Will the Aztecs D hold them under this number this game? So obviously the name of the game this week is going to be controlling the running game. They had 315 rushing yards last week, Oregon State?
Very similar to they did.
That was against Idaho State, so FCS opponent. But I think they need to keep them under 150 yards probably. Give or take, depending on how the passing game does. But I do think that if they allow 6 yards per carry and they allow them to have 300 yards, they're going to have a tough time winning.
Next Tuesday won't be fun.
Yeah.
I think that they can actually give up closer to 200 depending on how many times they pass the ball. So it's going to be that yard per carry as Don's bringing up. No, I don't think it'll be anywhere near close to 6. Last year, amazingly, Oregon State, Don, obviously we were there. Oregon State, they were passing the ball. They were 16th ranked in the nation, and San Diego State was basically trying to stop them from passing the ball, and they were able to run, just kind of do whatever they want. But I think it'll be different. But I don't know. There's a reason why there's so much, movement along the interior line, because they're trying to figure out, who the best players are there. Coach Lewis talked about Krishna Clay as somebody who, you didn't see, but he's starting to kind of do some of those explosive plays. And that's really what they're going to need. They're going to need a Sam Benjamin. They're going to need a Trey White. They're going to need whoever to be able to beat their man and stop the guy on first down and make it 2nd and 12. Yeah. That's the kind of stuff that they're going to need to do. And if they can do it consistently, then the game, it changes. It remains to be seen if they ran the ball as much as they did just because they wanted to get the game over with, or if that's this coach's true personality, because this is only his 2nd game as the head coach.
Yeah. We got our next guest, our 3rd and final guest on. Let's bring him in. Johnny Oliveira. What's going on, Johnny?
Not much. Just enjoying the great show. Some awesome topics so far. I'm liking it.
Thanks, brother.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah. If you guys don't know, Johnny is the 3rd member of our EVT football team this season. So in articles, tweets, videos from press conferences, things like that. Johnny is tearing it up there. You were there on. Go ahead.
No, I actually was. I think when we have conversed, Andre and I, Andre doesn't use the H in your name, and I do, and so I think this breaks the tie. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
so
yeah.
Just weird things that interest me.
Yeah. No. Interesting.
So you were at the game. You were sitting next to me in the press box on Saturday. What'd you make of Danny O'Neal, true freshman quarterback?
Yeah, no, it was interesting to watch. Like we've seen in some of the scrimmages, he struggled a little bit in those. So obviously coming out of the gate, I can't speak for how he felt out there, but I know me personally, I'd be a little bit nervous. So he comes out there. He didn't make any huge mistakes though. They have Marquez Cooper, that great running game, and I feel like that really helps him being able to lean on that, and then that can draw the defense into the box. And allow him to take some shots. You guys kind of mentioned it earlier, like the overthrows and how we may not know, but that may have been kind of by design. But overall, I mean, as a true freshman quarterback, first one in 56 seasons of Division I football for SDSU, came out in the first half and then really came out really strong in the second half. Put up 42 points. Obviously, a couple of those were on defense, but he completed a lot of his passes, plenty of yards, and finished strong. So I'm excited to see this next week, another true test for him.
We saw, obviously, Marquez Cooper get over 4,000 yards. We talked earlier on the show, Paul and I, about how many carries is too much, or wearing down right over a season. You asked Coach Lewis about that after the game. Can you talk about how he answered, and if you think he can hold up all season?
Yeah, obviously you hope so. It's sort of, we obviously saw an injury in the O-line, so that's going to play a big part into it. If this O-line's able to stay healthy and continue to play at a level that can allow him. He himself, Cooper, also mentioned, and I'll get right back to how Lewis answered it, but I'm jumping ahead here. But while we're talking about the O-line, Cooper, who obviously this team, there's no individuals, everybody's complimenting each other. And when we somebody asked him about the touchdown, he had mentioned how he went through untouched on that. So I think that obviously will play into the longevity of him, and then seeing how eventually, obviously this first game they ran it a lot. We'll see kind of how that opens up the pass game, and that might kind of alleviate some of that off of him. But yeah, Lewis had mentioned that that he just believes in his ability, and he knows Cooper wants to be fed the ball. So there's also that kind of comes into play. Like, you want these guys to have longevity for the season, but you also want to keep them kind of in that game shape and that game readiness. You don't want to you don't want their touches to fluctuate too much. So I think from how Lewis spoke, he seemed pretty confident in his ability to stay healthy throughout the season. But obviously there's other factors besides Cooper and the coaching staff giving him the ball that will kind of play into that. So that'll be interesting to see.
Johnny, you brought up the offensive line. If Borjon is out for an extended period of time, how do you think the old offensive line was going to hold up?
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see. Obviously, Lewis didn't give us at the presser much info about that injury, besides the fact that it obviously is the ankle and the knee. So I mean, it'll be a test. We already knew with the O-line was sort of an area.
I was going to say that was a great coach answer. It was
right?
Is it his knee or is it his ankle? And he's like, I think he probably hurt himself from head to toe. It was bad.
Yeah. That was a funny answer, but yeah. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see how they hold up. The first week there were a few penalties, some false start ones. You hope that those are maybe just first game jitters. But I think they were kind of thin at O-line already, so it'll be interesting to see how they can kind of move guys around if they need to, and then obviously minimizing the mistakes. Lewis had mentioned it, control the controllables. That's one of the major ones. I mean, you as an individual, there's 10 other guys out there, but you all have to work in unison as a unit to get it done. So that'll be interesting to see how that plays out as well.
If I'm assuming everybody here is already doing it, but if you're not following Johnny on X at SD Sports Mem, he is the guy who is in control of our game day social media content and things like that. So you want to make sure that you can see all of those things. Like, for instance, he was the first one who announced that it was 4,000 yards that he had passed, and being able to have that sweet picture of Marquez. He went and found it from the SDSU account.
Right.
But he also wrote a terrific preview that came out today for the East Village Times, previewing this upcoming game. If you were Oregon State, how would you attack the Aztecs?
Offensively, I think it's pretty obvious after that first game that we just saw both Jam Griffin and Anthony Hankerson combining for 315 yards, 2 touchdowns apiece, 4 total touchdowns. So if you're Oregon State attacking this Aztec defense, what I would do is I would just stay true. You have 2 great running backs that you can lean on early and often. If you're Oregon State, maybe you're hoping that Aztec fast offense starts out a little slower and you can kind of control this clock. run the ball and then, bring in this Aztec defense into the box more to be able to take some shots. We saw Giovanni McCoy for Oregon State. He only threw for 114 yards and a touchdown. And 55 of those 114 yards was a touchdown pass to David Wells Jr. So just about half of his yardage came on that. So I would assume that they would try and run the ball. Obviously, that will depend on how close this game stays. I mean, John on earlier had mentioned that, it may come down to the fourth quarter. Hopefully it's a one-score game. So we'll kind of see how that plays out. But I think that they'll off of the gate, if I'm Oregon State, I try and just run the ball and kind of see what that opens up as the game plays out.
What I found interesting is that, and Sean Lewis mentioned this yesterday, like I think 2 of the offensive linemen on Colorado last year that Sean Lewis coached are now on Oregon State.
Yeah, tackle and center.
So he's a little familiar with them. I don't know how he can, help the defense in that regard. But do you think the Aztecs can hold up against the physicality of the Beavers' offensive line and running game?
Yeah, I mean, you hope so, right? But we'll kind of have to see. When watching film, when I was writing that preview, I was watching some of the highlights from that first Oregon State game. What their offensive line does really well is blocking those linebackers and some of those safeties that come up to stuff the run. We saw the Aztec defense play very, very physical last Saturday. They forced a few turnovers, things like that. So I think that as long as they can stay physical like that, the linebackers come up, fill those gaps, those corners. They have some physical corners that can come up and make those tackles. So I think that they should hold up well, but obviously we'll have to see how that plays out on game day. Also, both those running backs, very similar in size. One's 5'8", 203, one's 5'9", 208. So both very identical in skill sets. Obviously, a few differences there, but another thing that they both do well that the Aztecs will have to, besides getting off their blocks, even if a guy gets a hit on them early, they both keep their feet moving very well. A lot of their yards came after contact. So, if so a linebacker can eat up a block for a corner or safety to come down and make that tackle. I think gang tackling is going to be important, and obviously getting off those blocks will be just as important as well.
Another weird thing that just entered into my mind. This is the first time in 5 years that I've covered the Aztecs where the opposing running back weighs more than me. I've been on a diet. You know what I mean? Drop below 200. Let's go,
man. Nice. The streak ends.
You know what I mean? I just thought of me. I was like, I used to weigh 203 and 208 pounds. You know what I mean? That was so long, last month.
I can't say the same.
Well, I mean, you also have a foot on me, man.
That's true. Thank you, Fernando, for your questions. He says, last question from me tonight. Do you think the playbook was limited for the first game and it will be opened up for Oregon State? I think Sean Lewis was asked last week how much of the playbook will be shown. And if I remember correctly, his answer was enough to win the game, or enough that we need to win the game, or something like that.
Another coach's answer, pretty much.
Yeah, coach. Yeah, for sure. But the valid question against an FCS opponent, I would say yes, but I'm curious your thoughts.
Yeah, that first game, I think we had talked about it a while back in the podcast, and Paul had mentioned it as sort of a dress rehearsal. No disrespect to Texas A&M-Commerce, but you have a whole new coaching staff, new players, lots of guys that weren't there last year. So you've been implementing this offense all off season, and it's sort of like we see in the NFL that in these preseason games they stay a little bit vanilla. They don't want to give it all away. So I think that they would have sort of kept the playbook as open as they needed to get that win, especially if they're looking at the schedule and going, I know they try and do it week by week, but if you're going, okay, we have Oregon State next week, and Sean Lewis being a first-year head coach at SDSU, he doesn't want to give up too much on film for them. I'm sure he wanted to keep some things under wraps. So I would believe that they're going to open up some things that we didn't see last week as well.
I agree. I think the caveat to that is you need to do enough so your freshman quarterback feels confident and finds success, right? And I think at a certain point, especially after this upcoming week, you kind of are just like, this is who we are. This is what we do. And it's going to be like, as Cheap Seats commented, it's going to be Aztec fans are going to be going Coop, or Oregon State fans are going to be going, their running backs. And that's what's going to determine this game, most likely, as opposed to anything else. But I think that they showed enough that they can counter something that they showed, if that makes any sense. Sometimes you want to show something because then when they watch it on tape, they're going to think it's that, but then you're doing something on the other side.
Yeah, good point.
Johnny,
All right.
Go ahead, Andre.
I was going to say, you got a shout out here. Awesome coverage. I recognize the last name there.
Yep. SDSU alumni.
Is that a brother? Is that a...
Yeah, so that's my brother. Aztec alumni. We're both born and raised here in San Diego. So, yeah, he's out in Virginia right now. So I'm surprised he was on when I was telling him earlier in the day.
Oh, man.
Yeah, I was telling him, and I was like reminding him, and then I was like, he's like, what time? And I was like, all right, I'm going to be on at 10:10. And then I'm thinking, shoot, it's like 1 a.m. out there. So he's awake and on. So I'm sure I'll be giving him a call to chat after this. He'll kind of give me some pointers on what I did. But yeah, he's out in Virginia getting his PhD out there. So it'll be, I was a little bit interested when I went out there to Virginia last time. We watched a basketball game, and then an Aztec ended up transferring out there. Drawing a blank on his name.
Elijah Saunders.
Yeah. So, but yeah, so he's up late. I appreciate the support. We're real close in age, only 22 months apart. So a lot of the same interests and stuff like that. So it's awesome.
Yeah. Well, thanks, Joe, for watching so late in the evening.
Yeah.
All
right, Johnny. We appreciate you coming on. Let's do it again next week.
Yep. I'll see you guys then. Have a good night, everybody.
Good night. Paul, you got a shout out here too.
Hey, man. But here's the thing. Andre got me like a really good webcam, and I misplaced it. So I think I always look a little bit better when it's a little bit grainy. You know what I mean? Like as long as it's a little dark, a little grainy. I think that's like my perfect light and perfect spot, man. But thank you, Robbie. I've been on a diet since January, dropped 50 pounds, believe it or not. So we're going to rock it until the end of the year, see where we're at, and then, readjust. So it's just been something I've done. It hasn't been a big deal, truthfully.
It's always a big deal.
I mean, this is life.
Yeah, I want to get to Ryan's comment here. I was encouraged by Danny's first half performance. Even with the score, he can throw deep. Just overthrew a little bit. Yeah, I definitely agree with that. Let's talk special teams before we.
Let me touch on Ryan's thing, and to your point, as far as like showing the next things, like if you show that you can throw 60 yards in the air, that might give pause to safeties creeping too far up, and when they have to play that extra help, like they're gonna, and even just showing that is what his arm is. When you win 45-14, it's not even really that bad of a result, right? Especially if he can start hitting those going forward. So I agree that in some ways, ironically, it's kind of encouraging that he showed that that's the kind of hand cannon that he's got.
Yeah. So, anything special teams noteworthy before we close this out?
No, absolutely.
You mentioned it in your article. Yeah. You want to touch on that?
Sure, man. I thought special teams, and I asked Sean Lewis about this on Monday, and he didn't affirm my thought on it. He's like, there's already plenty of tape on what we do on special teams. But he's, they of all of the phases where you're just like, man, they showed a lot, right? Like on defense, they had a lot of formations. And again, you want Oregon State preparing for all of these possibilities of what they're going to do on defense. But the same thing with special teams. They actually converted a 2-point conversion. Like if you were trying to save something for Oregon State, that extra point, if John Schaefer's prediction is correct, is a fourth quarter game, that extra point on a the 2 points instead of one, the extra point, could be really valuable here. So maybe you'd want to save that. But at the same time, that Oregon State's going to be having to prepare for that. And maybe, they would have been doing that anyway because of all that they've done in the past. But I just thought that they did a ton on special teams in just the first week. I thought, interestingly enough, I did not think until the very end of the game that any of the kickers kicked the ball well. I don't know if, they didn't have the footballs worked out right or what it was, but you just didn't see that, just like that they fully got it, the wiggle of the ball as opposed to turning over, things like that. And so I think that they can get a lot better on special teams just by actually kind of really getting it. I thought Nick Lopez, I thought it was good that he had those two, especially the last one that I think went like halfway through the end zone for on the kickoffs for a touchdown. But they did not change the depth chart at field goal kicker or at the kickoff specialist, but they're going to be rotating him, it says, and trying to see if they can get somebody who can be consistent. But I thought overall, they're going to have to spend a lot of time on what San Diego State does on special teams. And so I thought, just as far as like the strategy of, trying to make sure that Oregon State has to spend time on special teams because of what they do. At one time a couple times they had Jordan Napier up shorter and Mikey Welsh in the back. Other times it was Mikey Welsh was by himself. One time they had Mekhi Shaw back there. There's just different things that they're doing. And so I think that making Oregon State prepare for all of those, I think it is smart. I would like to see them, as I said, kick the ball harder, further, whatever those things are on both on punts and on kickoffs. But I thought the coverage was excellent. I thought that, even on some of those short kicks, I thought that they were really barreling down on them, and obviously they didn't give up any big gains.
Yeah, I mean, Placencia made a 50-yard field goal in the first half, so that's a positive sign. I think he missed a 48-yarder and an extra point. The thing about the extra points is, I watch a lot of football, and I always see those teams who they'll have those spread out, and then they'll always come back in, they'll always kick in. Every time I see teams do it, I kind of like, why are they doing this? And then I missed the 2-point run by Harrison because I was like, okay, they're just gonna kick the extra point, and I missed it. I looked down, I was typing, and then I heard like commotion. I look up and Mike Harrison's running in the end zone. I was like,
have you seen the replay?
What's that?
Have you seen the replay?
Yeah, what I was gonna point out was the snap by Wintermeyer was like not even through his legs. It was like a little shovel. Backhanded shovel to the right. That's impressive. That's pretty impressive. But yeah, I didn't even know that. I wouldn't even know that was legal.
I didn't either until I'm watching it. I was watching the replay. I was like, all right.
I'm assuming it is legal, and the refs didn't miss it.
That'd be a big miss.
That's an impressive snap, or at least ability to get it to Harrison fast enough and accurate enough so that he doesn't have to, reach this way or reach down, and so he has momentum going into wherever he's going. So yeah, gives Oregon State another thing to look at.
And I speaking of Mikey Harrison, I obviously he had that play. He broke a tackle, but they're. It seemed like their offense was more spread out when he was in there. And I think that's another way to maybe keep the numbers game honest, is sometimes you just, you want Harrison to be able to block somebody, but he might be undersized to go head to head with a linebacker. Well, if you line him up outside and now you got a safety on him, or a linebacker has to go out there, you've effectively just got him to take away a guy, even though he's not blocking him, at the point of attack. Obviously he did that as well. But I thought that's an interesting strategy. And he made guys miss. I thought that their tight ends, were decent for what they needed. But yeah, I thought as our first opportunity to see Mikey Harrison, I wouldn't want to miss that. But dude, hats off to you, Andre. Good show, brother.
Yeah, we made it to an hour and a half.
Yeah, it's
There
great.
you go.
I want to thank
our
John
guest.
Schaefer, Malik White, Johnny Oliveri. I mean, we appreciate you guys coming and being our guest. All of you who asked questions, put in the chat. Thank you. Our intention is to do this every Tuesday, so please come back. Tell your friends. Let's try to build this thing where we can hang out every week, talk about Aztec football.
All right, guys, thanks for listening. Make sure to hit the subscribe button if you haven't already. Hit the like button. Share, as Paul said, with all your friends and family who may be Aztec fans, may just be college football fans, maybe college sports fans in general. We appreciate you guys for listening, and we'll talk to you guys next time.